He was born on the small, volcanic island of Montserrat, but his dreams were far too big to be contained there. At just 9 years old, young Meade left the Caribbean behind and landed in Swansea, Wales, a new world, colder skies, tougher streets. But something in him was already burning. After school, instead of drifting, Meade chose discipline. He joined the Royal Air Force Regiment in Catterick. That's where his fizz started talking. Representing the RAF, he stepped into the ring, not just for sport, but to carve out a future. His talent didn't go unnoticed. He began smashing through inter-service opponents, earning a name in amateur circles. Then came 1973, Wembley Arena, the final of the ABA Heavyweight Championship. It was his moment, but he fell short. Garfield McEwen took the win, and Meade tasted the sting of defeat. But instead of folding, Meade went back to work. Fast forward just 1 year, 1974. Same ring, same title on the line. This time, Meade wasn't leaving without gold. And he didn't. He won the English amateur title, his passport to the world stage. Next stop, the Commonwealth Games in New Zealand. Meade didn't just show up, he made a statement. He breezed through the early rounds, outpointed Canada's Carol Morgan, and handled Samoa's Vai Samu like a veteran. In the finals, he stood across from Nigeria's Fatai Ayinla, a seasoned warrior with medals from 66 and 70. On paper, Ayinla had the edge, but in the ring, Meade had the fire. He dominated. The referee had seen enough. He stopped the fight. From a boy in Montserrat to a champion on the world stage, Meade was crowned Commonwealth heavyweight gold medalist. Just 7 months after his golden triumph at the Commonwealth Games, Neville Meade stepped into the world of professional boxing. It was September 1974, and he wasn't eased in gently. His debut opponent, Tony Mikulski, unbeaten in 7, hungry for more. The venue? The elegant Grosvenor House Hotel in London. The stakes were high. The bell rang, fists flew, and for 6 brutal rounds they battled. When the dust settled, the decision went to Mikulski. A setback? Sure, but Meade wasn't the type to disappear after a loss. A month later, back in Swansea, his adopted home, Meade returned to the ring against Roger Barlow. This time, there was no need for the judges. Meade ended it in the third with a thunderous TKO, his first win, but he wasn't done. Just a week later, he entered a wild 2,000-pound knockout tournament back at the Grosvenor. It was a test of endurance and power, 3 fights in one night. First came Harold James. Meade outpointed him. Then Les McGowan, dropped in the first round. And finally, Jeff Heppelstone, another first-round stoppage. 3 fights, 3 wins, one night. The message was clear. Meade had arrived. He closed 1974 with another victory, outpointing Eddie Fenton at the National Sporting Club in London, ending the year with momentum and menace. But 1975 brought new challenges. On February 17th, he faced rising contender Richard Dunn. The bout ended in heartbreak. Meade was stopped for the first time in his pro career. A bitter pill. Dunn would go on to become British champion and stand toe-to-toe with Muhammad Ali himself. Meade, meanwhile, stayed in the trenches, learning the hard way. He faced Tony Moore twice, losing the first by TKO, but grinding out a draw in the rematch. Then came a string of redemption. 5 wins to finish the year, including a revenge victory over Moore in their third meeting. He stopped 4 others: Lloyd Walford, Derek Simpkin, John Depledge, and Lucian Rodriguez, the last of whom would one day be crowned European heavyweight champion. And Meade had beaten him in his own backyard, Paris. 1976 started with a stumble, a loss to Alfredo Evangelista in Madrid. But Meade didn't dwell. 2 weeks later, back in Swansea, he fought for the Welsh heavyweight crown against Tony Blackburn. It was personal. It was electric. Meade ended it in the 4th with a crushing technical knockout, claiming his first professional title. And as if to tie up old wounds, Meade soon faced Garfield Owen, the same man who had beaten him in the 1973 ABA final. This time, Meade was no amateur. He came back stronger, smarter, and walked away the winner. By August 1976, Neville Meade was riding high, Welsh champion, powerful and battle-tested. And now, the door to the British heavyweight title creaked open. A first-round eliminator was set. The stage? Cardiff, Wales. The opponent? Dynan Ruddock, a heavy hitter with his own ambitions. For 7 rounds, Meade fought hard, but Ruddock landed the heavier shots. The referee stepped in. Meade was stopped. His title hopes derailed. That night marked more than just a loss. It was the beginning of a storm. What followed was the toughest stretch of Meade's career. The next fight? Another defeat. This time at the hands of rising star John L. Gardner, a man destined to become European champion. Meade was stopped again. The cracks were showing. Then came a glimmer, a trip to Oslo, where Meade put away Bjorn Rudy. But any hope of a full comeback was crushed in Brussels when he was outpointed by Jean-Pierre Koopman, who was on his way to capturing the European crown. And then came Johannesburg. South African powerhouse Kali Noetsa handed Meade the first clean knockout of his professional career. It was a blow that went beyond the ring. Back in Britain, in December 1977, Meade tried to right the ship. He beat American Bruce Grandham, a much-needed win. But the relief was short-lived. In the rematch just 3 months later, Grandham flipped the script and took the win. Then came Paul Sykes, a ferocious brawler with a reputation for chaos. Meade didn't make it to the final bell. And in January 1979, Albert Sabin added another stoppage to Meade's record. The fire hadn't gone out, but it had dimmed. From 1976 to early 1979, Meade's career was in a downward spiral. More losses than wins. More questions than answers. He had gone from a rising champion to a man fighting for his identity, not just as a boxer, but as a survivor in the unforgiving world of heavyweight boxing. But the story doesn't end there. By the time Neville Meade turned 30, he wasn't just down, he was nearly out. His body was worn, his spirit shaken. Since lifting the Welsh title, he'd stepped into the ring 10 times and walked away defeated in 7 of them. 6 times he hadn't even heard the final bell. The whispers in boxing circles were getting louder. Meade was finished. But Meade wasn't listening. Determined to flip the script, he teamed up with a new trainer, Jimmy Bromfield, and began working out of Colin Breen's gritty little gym in Sandfields, Swansea. There, in the sweat and silence, Meade began to rebuild. No noise, no spotlight, just hard work and reflection. He vanished from the ring for nearly a year. When he returned in early 1980, it was to defend the very title that once brought him hope, the Welsh heavyweight crown. His opponent, a hungry young brawler named David Pearce. The bout was held in Caerphilly, but it didn't last long. In just the second round, Meade stunned the crowd with a controversial stoppage win. Some call it lucky. Meade called it a new beginning. Next came Winston Allen, another second-round stoppage. Meade was gaining momentum, and for the first time in years, his punches were carrying purpose. He was offered a British title eliminator. His opponent, Stan Dermott, stood across from him under the bright lights of the Royal Albert Hall. It was December 8th, 1980, and Meade wasn't about to miss his shot. In the 5th round, he broke Dermott down. Another stoppage, another step forward, and in Ebbw Vale, he made it 4 straight KOs, crushing Terry Mintis in 3 rounds. The British heavyweight title was now within reach. On October 12th, 1981, it all came to a head. Meade stepped into the ring at the Aston Villa Leisure Centre in Birmingham to face reigning champion Gordon Ferris. The bout was aired live across Britain. The first round began with a feeling-out process, both men cautious. But then, with less than 30 seconds to go, Meade struck gold. A sharp left jab rattled Ferris. As the champion tried to reset, Meade unleashed a savage right hook that landed flush on Ferris' jaw. The Irishman hit the canvas and didn't get up. Neville Meade was the new British heavyweight champion. But his victory came at a price. Just weeks later, he was signed by high-profile promoter Terry Lawless, ending his bond with Jimmy Bromfield, the very man who helped resurrect his career. Meade's next bout was a tough one. He dropped a decision to American Leroy Boone. But in February, he bounced back, knocking out Rick Keller at the NEC in Birmingham. Then came the final chapter, September 22nd, 1983. Meade stood across from a familiar face, David Pearce, the same fighter he'd beaten in his comeback fight 3 years earlier. This time, the stakes were sky high. It would be Meade's first defense of the British title, and, though no one knew it yet, his last fight ever. The bout was brutal, a throwback to the old wars. 15 rounds were scheduled, the final time a British title would ever be contested over that distance. but it didn't make it that far. In the 9th round, Pierce's pressure overwhelmed Meade. The referee stepped in. Just like that, the journey was over. Neville Meade never fought again. But from Montserrat to Swansea, from knockout losses to championship glory, his story was one of fighting back, again and again, when the world least expected it. Neville Meade was never one for dancing around a ring. He was a wrecking ball, pure power and motion. Of his 20 professional wins, 18 came by knockout. Only 2 of his opponents managed to hear the final bell, and one of those was a short 4-rounder. Meade didn't come to box pretty. He came a trade fire. As one commentator put it, Meade was a hit or get hit kind of fighter, and he made peace with that. But his brute strength had a price. Meade wasn't known for discipline. He hated training and often showed up to fights tipping the scales well over 17 stone. As the years rolled on, the weight slowed him down. He was still dangerous, but not sharp. It wasn't until trainer Jimmy Bromfield stepped in with a firm demand: train properly or walk away, that things began to change. By the time Meade stepped into the ring for his title showdown with Gordon Ferris, he had trimmed down to a leaner 16 stone, 3 pounds. That discipline helped him land the British heavyweight crown. Outside the ring, Meade's story took turns both tender and tragic. He had 3 long-term partners and fathered 5 children. In 1977, his 3rd child, Michelle, was born. She grew up in Cardiff, later moving to Worksop for studies at Welbeck Defence Sixth Form College before returning to Cardiff to train as an accountant. She still lives there today with her husband and 2 sons, keeping her father's memory alive in quiet strength. Meade's youngest, James, was born in 1988 and raised in Swansea. There's another Meade in the spotlight, too. Neville's great-nephew, Grenade Meade, who once graced the Premier League with Arsenal FC and later Swansea City. But for Neville himself, life after boxing wasn't so kind. He struggled deeply. With the roar of the crowd gone and the punches no longer landing, Meade fell into alcoholism. In 2004, he was living in a homeless hostel, and things hit rock bottom when he found himself in court after an altercation with police. Yet even then, Meade found the strength to stand up once more. He began working with youth, trying to pass on something of his hard-earned wisdom to the next generation. For a while, things got better. He found meaning in helping others. But in late 2009, a new opponent stepped into the ring: cancer. It was a fight Meade couldn't win. On March 13, 2010, at Ty Olwen Hospice in Swansea, Neville Meade passed away. He was just 57, but he left behind more than just a boxing record. He left behind a story of power, pain, redemption, and love. From Montserrat to Swansea, from knockout artist to youth mentor, Neville Meade's life was never perfect, but it was real and unforgettable. Neville Meade's life wasn't just about titles and knockouts. It was about rising, falling, and finding the courage to rise again. If stories like this move you, real, raw, and unforgettable, then hit that subscribe button, drop a comment to let us know what you think, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful boxing story.